seems to be a more than pertinent topic given the corporate governance of both Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank of New York, as we're learning more about with each passing hour. Here's Icon.
Powell really has to raise interest rates sooner or later. I can't talk about next week or even next month, but inflation is the worst thing an economy can have, and I think people underrate that. If you look in history, every hegemony has been destroyed by inflation, or almost everyone. I mean, just go back to Rome. That's what happens. And one of our major problems, I think, in this economy right now is there's no leadership on the corporate level. You know, forget politically, and I'm not going to get into politics, but I think you do feel that in Washington, nobody knows what's really going on. But forgetting that, in our corporations, and I've lived with that, I mean, all my life, basically, and companies today really have, with many exceptions, many exceptions, leadership is worse than mediocre. And that's why we are so successful. I mean, not because we're geniuses, but because you go into a company today, and that's what we've done over and over and over again, and it's really horrible what you find in many of them. Just
we'll get to your...
Imagine if Carl Icahn had taken a look at Signature Bank of New York for possible acquisition and found those parody songs and sketch comedy routines that the senior leadership of Signature Bank of New York was busily producing rather than minding the store. Icahn went on to emphasize the need to combat inflation, that because of what's happened with those two big banks does not mean that Powell should take his foot off the interest rate pedal.
Bank failure is a manifestation of the leadership in our companies and the way they spend money. And you really have a moral hazard if you just keep bailing them out. In this case, I'm not going to opine on trying to save some poor people, although the depositors in Silicon Valley weren't exactly poor people. But that's not the issue. The issue is you have to stop inflation. So you say, do we keep going on? I don't think you have a choice. If you don't keep going on, I really believe that the problem of inflation can become such that it's very difficult to get out of it.
For more on this, please be joined by Steve Moore, economist, Govzilla author. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Well, good morning, guys. By the way, you caught me with a donut in my mouth, so
all right.
Hold that for a second.
Finish your donut and then respond to Carl Icahn.
No, I got to tell you, though, that Carl Icahn clip, amazing. I mean, you don't need me, Dan Amy, because he said it perfectly. We have mediocre leadership at best in Washington. We're borrowing money like crazy. It's driven up interest rates, and it's causing havoc in the banking industry and the financial industry. It's that simple. Week after week after week, we've talked about this. Now, I'd add a couple things. Stop with this nonsense of saying this isn't a bailout, Joe Biden. Of course it's a bailout. Even Paul Krugman today in his column says, okay, yeah, this is a bailout.
Yeah, right.
Stop with the nonsense that the taxpayers aren't going to pay for this. Dan Amy, if the taxpayers aren't going to pay for it, who is? The man on the moon?
Will our banking fees go up because of this?
Right. Well,
seriously, am I paying for this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just so dishonest. And the third thing I've got to say, and you can tell I'm a little angry because I just think this is so wrong. And then you've got, if you go back to the early 1930s when we started the deposit insurance system, it was basically from, lower income and middle income working families so they wouldn't lose their lifetime savings if a bank failed. And, I'm a pretty libertarian person, but I think that was probably a pretty smart policy to stop runs on banks. The number keeps going up and up and up. Do you know what the first number was, by the way, the amount of the limit on the FDIC insurance was back in the 1930s?
No.
$2,500. Now, there's been a lot of inflation since then, but,
right.
So even if adjusting for inflation, that's maybe $100,000. Today, the limit is $250,000. Right. You know what the limit is going to be tomorrow?
Unlimited.
Infinity.
Yes.
Infinity. And so now, how many people who are not rich do you think have a deposit in banks of more than $250,000? Probably pretty close to zero, right?
Right.
And so this is not just a bailout, it's a bailout of rich people. Now, wait a minute, Dan and Amy. I thought last week Joe Biden said he was going to sock it to the rich. I guess he has to tax the rich so he can give the money to other rich people who have money in these accounts. I mean, it is the most crazy lunatic thing, and it just seems like nobody, as Carl Icahn said, there's no adult in the room in Washington.
Well, these are the preferred rich, though, because they're leftists
Exactly,
in Silicon Valley.
I
mean, what do you want? You want Gavin Newsom to lose the funds that he has for his wineries in Silicon Valley Bank, something that he didn't disclose as he was cheerleading the bailout of Silicon Valley and also Silicon Valley Bank, because it's both. They're inextricably linked. But where are?
By the way, one of my friends just tweeted me this morning and said, if it was Shenandoah National Bank, do you think they would bail them out?
Yeah, right.
Probably not. These are the rich Democratic donors. And,
That's right.
It creates, and again, Carl Icahn really nailed it. This is a classic moral hazard problem. Dan, if they're going to, every time you make a bad investment and you lose money, they're going to give you your money back, then you and I are going to get the next flight out to Las Vegas and put all our money on the roulette wheel. Because if we win, we made millions of dollars. If we lose, the government's going to give us our money back.
But why do we not hear Republicans saying we're not going to do too big to fail anymore? This is whether the Fed technically has the authority to for these emergency measures and so on and so forth. Well, we can argue that, but it is a bad policy decision, whether you have the power legitimately or not, to bail out Silicon Valley and these uninsured depositors, and we shouldn't be doing it. I don't hear moral clarity from the Republicans on this.
Yeah, because I think they like bailouts too. I mean,
okay, well, there you go.
How many times in our lifetime have we bailed out failed companies? I mean, this is the last time, okay? And this is the last time we're going to do this, right? It's like, when I was growing up, my mom used to take out, she would take up the switch and she would whack us. If you do that again, I'm going to whack you. But imagine if you had, if my mother said, if you don't empty the dishwasher, I'm going to give you a spanking. But I don't empty the dishwasher, she doesn't spank me. And then she said, but if you don't, empty the dishwasher, I'm going to spank you. The next day she doesn't. You can appreciate this as a mother, and so then. What happens? You don't believe them. Why would anybody believe these people? They always bail out the losers. Mm-hmm. This isn't free market capitalism. Mm-hmm. It's not the free enterprise system. This is the opposite of free enterprise. Will you please tell your Republican friends that, Dan and Amy?
Right. They had $88 billion in deposits, $110 billion in assets at the end of 2022. So this is all blamed on Biden? I mean, what else could it be blamed on?
Well,
besides rising interest rates?
That's a good question. So here's what happened. And I'm not a total expert on this, but basically you had zero interest rates for many years by the Fed. They orchestrated this. And then all of a sudden, we get a president who comes in and he borrows trillions and trillions of dollars. And Trump actually did that in his last year in office during COVID. So we borrowed like $6-7 trillion. And what happens? Oh, gee, we have inflation. Who would have thought that would happen when you borrow all this money and pour it into the economy? And so the inflation goes up to 9%, and the Fed has to raise interest rates to suck some of this money back. So the interest rates went from basically 0% to 4% in less than a year. And these banks made a wrong arbitrage play on the interest rates. They were holding all these bonds that were now worthless because of the higher interest rates, and that's why Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt. But there's another tangent to this story, which you guys mentioned earlier, which is, isn't it interesting that these banks that are collapsing are the ones that got into all this woke craziness? And when I saw that, was it Signature Bank that had that crazy people dancing
the
around?
The videos, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought, was that a parody or is it real?
No, it's real. They paid a lot of money to produce those videos.
Oh my God. Folks, if you haven't seen those videos, I mean, it is, my jaw just opened. I mean, how much did they spend on that, Amy? Probably millions of dollars. It's high production.
It is. And then they tried their, hand at comedy and sketch musical combos, and it's just so cringeworthy.
And then you had the situation in Silicon Valley Bank, this, Dan, where they basically didn't have anybody doing any due diligence in terms of the risk officer. They for 6 months they didn't have a risk officer at a bank.
Oh and they gave themselves all bonuses at the SVB before they left. The day before the FDIC took over, they get because who gets bonuses in the middle of March? Nobody. Only when your bank's closing.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like Bernie Madoff. It sounds like let's get our money out of this thing before it completely collapses. So it's a smelly story. It's rancid. We keep bailing out the losers, and who's always the person who pays the price tag for this? The little guy. And when you mentioned, Dan, too big to fail, which is a terrible doctrine that we have. What do we have? Big labor, big government, big business. They're too big to fail. But I guarantee you, Ann, Amy, you and me and all the people listening to this show are not too big to fail. But the big businesses and big government and big labor, they are too big to fail.
And also, too, since we don't really know what the ultimate number is going to be, we don't know how many more banks will fail once there's a real taking into account of what their balance sheets look like. It could be a lot of regional banks could be in the same position with respect to a bond that Silicon Valley Bank was in. So we don't know how big this is ultimately going to get, but to the extent that we're into billions, hundreds of billions perhaps of dollars, then isn't that inflationary? So we're going to continue printing and spending while Jay Powell is incrementally increasing interest rates. So we're exacerbating inflation while he's trying to combat inflation. The fiscal side is doing one thing, the monetary side is doing another.
Yeah. None of this makes any sense, folks. These are kindergartners playing playing games with our money. And this all circles back to the spending spree in Washington. We have a government that is completely out of control. They're acting like they're playing with monopoly money. And this is real money, folks, that they're spending. And you're right, Dan. This is now look, I want to make sure people understand this though. We're not facing a mass, I don't want people to be afraid that they're going to lose their money in the banks because they are insured. And so that's a good thing. And so you don't have to worry. You don't have to run to your bank right now and take your money out of the bank. But it just is so obvious that the people who always benefit from these programs are the big political donors, like the people on Silicon Valley. And it wouldn't have happened if it had been Shenandoah National Bank, because people don't care about them. They care about the donors of both parties. And I'm not being Republican here because the Republicans, it was under George W. Bush. We did the last big bailout. Remember that, Dan?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And do you remember what George Bush said? Do you remember his famous quote? And I like George Bush. Remember he said, we have to destroy capitalism to save it, or something like that.
No, it's no different than Joe Biden with the shovel-ready project saying we have to keep spending money to prevent from going bankrupt. This is the doublespeak that you get from both sides, which is why people have rebelled against the political ruling class and may again in 24. We'll see. He is Steve Moore, economist and Govzilla author. Steve, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. You too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Hi, I'm Ken Mariotti, owner of Woodland Windows and Doors in Roselle. It's been a long, cold winter, but finally, spring is in the air. A time to brighten things up around the house. Make the rooms in your house that appear small, dark, or dingy look better and bigger with larger windows or patio doors. Our highly skilled craftsmen can enlarge openings if your space allows. For over 52 years, Woodland has been transforming living spaces with Marvin windows. Styles ranging from modern to traditional. Marvin replacement windows and doors can also bring your backyard right into your living space. Ask us about connecting the inside to the outside. When you welcome a Woodland sales expert into your home, you'll get a no-pressure sale, a product expert, a design consultant, and someone who has your best interest in mind. Professional services, along with the best products and installation in the market. See Marvin Products in our showroom at the corner of Lake and Geary in Roselle. Visit woodlandwindows.com or call for a free in-home expert consultation.
Did you give up on your New Year's resolution already? You don't have to, since you can lose a contractually guaranteed 20 to 40 plus pounds in only 40 days with NJ Diet. That's guaranteed weight loss. NJ Diet's scientific approach uses your hair, saliva, and blood work to personalize solutions and supplements to help reset your metabolism, where the side effect is weight loss. NJ Diet then uses DNA testing to help you keep it off. No shots, no hormones, no surgery, no prepackaged foods. Contractually guaranteed weight loss of 20 to 40 plus pounds. Full supervision every step of the way to make sure you're burning fat, not just losing water. You'll also be provided the doctor's personal email and phone number in the event you have questions. NJ Diet has locations in Skokie and Oak Brook, or is available nationwide with live online video consultations. So lose the weight now. Call 855-5NJ-DIET. That's 855-5NJ-DIET. Or schedule your consultation online by visiting njdiet.com. That website, njdiet.com. Make today the day you lose the weight for good and keep your New Year's resolution. Visit njdiet.com or call 855-5NJ-DIET.
Have you been struggling to find an easy, safe, and secure document scanning solution for Salesforce.com, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, or